because you were not doing it manually. Oh, we are cool, we have this thing, we use our time well. Beyond a point, it became a necessity because in came the new HR person and said, where is the system? I'm not going to do it myself. So it almost became a need. Then gradually it came to a stage where management wanted the speed of decision so fast that you do need to have that system. So beyond a point, you're right, Sunil, the systems look very similar, and they would, because they have stopped being differentiators for us. But what struck me, Accord, when you said that you didn't need a manual guide for Twitter, you didn't need a user guide for Facebook, but guess what? Facebook was not looking for a return for that employee. They were looking for a return for themselves. And when we are gradually making systems which are very employee-oriented, let the employee decide who to take the feedback from, let the employee decide who's doing their succession planning, let the employee decide which training to do. It sounds cool. If you leave it to me, I would love to be that employee who's getting to do all that. But now I'm thinking as the HR person on the ground, am I getting the bang for the buck? Am I seeing a lot more maturity sitting in the system? Am I really seeing them use that? Am I really seeing succession planning happening the way I would have wanted it? Is it really helping me in my decision? So yes, I've seen that software where the succession planning has been done, and I've culled out that data. I've done a 6 months mapping to say how many decisions I actually ended up taking the way the data was showing. Unfortunately, so far, I at least didn't see a very promising return. Theoretically, I would still want that data. So I'm not saying that I'm still in the antique era where I don't like the system, but it'll be good to hear views from others. How are you experiencing once it is being implemented? Because eventually it needs to help us not only become efficient in terms of saving costs, but it needs to help us beyond a point making decisions in a cloud manner, because we are seeing now employees are making decisions, and that's helping us as a business. So it'll be good to hear views around.
So one more point I would like to add here, and Tarun, I represent FDS in India, so it's quite similar to what has been pointed out on the use of integrated system, etc. So one more area which is always a concern as an employee. So when you talk about performance, especially in sales staff or sales-oriented organizations, performance is getting tracked in various systems. So finance has their own system, sales has their own Salesforce system, HR has their performance management system. So finally things get integrated, but the process is defined. So the final call will be that what data you get from corporate finance or somebody's finance who's collating actual achievements will get monitored and registered as your final achievements. So in your experience and connecting to the points that she has also, so Ruchita has made, so how do you integrate all this in an organization where there are already systems in place? And what is the business case you build to people sitting in finance and other line functions to agree to this common system of rewarding performance? Because for an employee to see objectivity in performance is very important.
I think the path you described actually perfectly explains from the buyer's point of view what happened. I was describing it really from a ecosystem point of view, right? But if you think about it from the buyer's point of view, we've now had a massive transformation, because at first it was about cloud computing was going to be cheaper and easier, right? Then it was about, hey, look how much faster I can integrate and implement. And then it was about, hey, look at how I can bring all these processes together. And then it was, now look how good it looks and how easy it is to get data in the system. And now, because of all those steps, we've gotten to the point where we actually do have a lot of data in the system. So now we're on the next step, and that's analytics. So that's why all these vendors are talking about analytics now, because we now have all the data. We did have adoption because it was useful to do it. But now the companies are saying, okay, I know it's easy to implement. I know it's easy to use. I know it's been effective. How do I make this more useful going forward? And the answer is having better analytics tools, making it easier for people to get the data they want, making it easier for the system to make recommendations about financial decisions, hiring decisions, promotion decisions, compensation decisions, which have very tangible ROIs to them, and making it so that you can pull out your tablet or your phone and start thinking about the organization, start looking at where mobility should be. And all of those things ultimately will drive the usefulness of these systems. But we're only asking those questions now because we already solved all the other steps, right? So it's a very interesting way to think about it. Actually, this was all probably highly predictable because you needed the data to get to the point where you ask the question, well, what am I supposed to do with all this data now? 5 years ago, people didn't have the data yet. So we've come a long way. I don't think we should view it as, oh, we have all these gaps. We should realize we've made tremendous strides. And the good news is the technology has advanced along the way such that you actually now can get really good analytics.
I don't think so. The point, Adam, or for others, was to say that the idea is to question gaps. The idea is to learn or hear others' experiences on how we are currently leveraging. Of course, analytics, once we get onto the analytics bandwagon, I'm sure there's more evolution waiting for us after that too. All I'm saying is this is still a phase, we are still going through it. While we get into the analytics, how are we using this data with us? So we have to live both the worlds. So one is today and one is tomorrow. So we do need to continue preparing, and which is why I said I'm not as NTK as probably I'm sounding, but the idea is how do we keep both the things together? And that's where the adoption stickiness becomes a lot better. That is where I was talking to others as well.
I'd just like to add here, I mean, whatever I've seen in my experience, a lot of time what happens is that when the, I'm Sharmeen. I come from an internet company called InfoEdge. We own portals like Naukri.com and 99acres.com. So a lot of time what I've seen is that, you know, when the team is getting made, which will spearhead this whole, journey of getting a new system in place and, ensuring execution, etc., etc. I really wonder whether the best team sometimes is put on a job like this or not. A lot of times it's a very hasty decision. Not the best people come together. Maybe their critical thinkings or critical thinking skills or analytical skills are not that evolved that they can actually visualize that, okay, if I need this report, now what all do I need to do? So the question that we as HR should be asking is that when I'm, making that decision, am I involving my key stakeholders in the whole process? Is my CEO with me? Just like he sanctions big budget items on learning, or let's say, hiring a CXO, a marketing campaign, will he do appraisal of his own direct reports through the new HRIs? So, I guess some of the learnings that I have seen is that put very good people as part of the team, get your CEO's buy-in, get key stakeholders buy-in in the whole process, and I guess that'll work better.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of times now, exactly to your point, and this is sometimes scary for us as a vendor, but we are often seeing now that the initial rollout is occurring with the senior-most people in the organization. So the very first rollout is to the executive team. Because if they buy into it, everybody else will adopt it.
So the CFO, in my opinion, the CFO and the CEO and the CHRO, they should.
So adoption from both the perspectives. And taking another point on this part, what is the role of HR in there? I think it's very, very important when we are adopting any technology is to understand the culture and the system, our own value system of the organization. So your people, everything. So that when you create a system and when you look at any technology, you should be able to customize as per your needs. And that, again, will impact the adoption part.
Just on that exact point, just for a show of hands, how many people have a reporting analyst on their HR team or a data scientist on their HR team? I mean, this is going to be a skill that's needed for HR professionals, right? How to leverage all the data that they're getting. What are the right reports to run? Soon the systems will be able to have all the answers. The hard part's going to be to figure out the questions.
And also what decisions you take at the back of the data, that's critical.
That's right.
So Adam, I have a question for you vis-a-vis India. As you may have recognized by now, India, we are a very heterogeneous set of employees. And as we got the invite from Mint, it straddles multiple generations. How does what you offer straddle all the generations together? So I may be a smartphone user, but I may not be a Twitter user. And vice versa, and multiple generations may have different ways of, here we're putting the user in the middle of it and assuming, and we're also talking about a new workforce and the high potentials. But having said that, the experienced hands in certain, sectors do definitely are very credible and are, marching with the young workforce. And I'm not necessarily talking about the e-commerce companies. I'm talking about across sectors. How does this factor that in? Is your user interface different? The way they kind of operate or behave with the system different? And how do you kind of capture data adequately for all across generation of employees?
So I'm going to answer that question, but before I do, I want to point out that we shouldn't underestimate the older generation. The fastest growing segment on Facebook is the over 50 demographic. So that is the fastest group on Facebook. Where we often have conversations in North America is around this idea of the new way to do things. So people are always talking about social feedback and gamification and badging and all of these new ways of doing performance management or learning management, right? Mobile learning, social learning. And there were companies that spawned up to do just those very specific things. And the reality was those companies didn't succeed. Why? Because most companies can't only do it the new way. But they shouldn't only do it the old way. So what we pride ourselves on as a technology vendor is that because we deal with such large organizations and some very small cutting edge organizations, that we can do things both the old way and the new way. We could let you do recruiting through a newspaper, but we also can let you do recruiting through LinkedIn and Twitter. So the world of recruiting changed, and a lot of companies emerged saying that the only way to recruit is through social media, that you should only be doing social recruiting. But the reality is, not every job function is going to be sourced through social media. And that, particularly when you're talking about the Global 2000, you have to do things both the old way, because it works, and the new way, because you have to be able to respond to the needs of the new generation of workers. And we like to sometimes say that the new generation of workers is not necessarily by age. It's by mentality.
And Twitter were. So it was some smart HR people who actually started looking at Facebook and Twitter and said, okay, here we have a whole mobile workforce that does not look at desktops, just simply interacts on smartphones. So perhaps that's one of the reasons.
It's a very fundamental question here. Would Facebook still be a place where professionals would interact? I would not personally think so.
Yeah, that's a big question mark. I mean, personally, at least from the way we look at social media, I wouldn't subscribe to that exactly, because the reactions that we get, but I think Adam would have a different perspective perhaps.
I will add on to this that Facebook is not a talent acquisition kind of portal. It's, to check the credentials of a candidate whom you recruited, and just see the lifestyle he's having, all these things. Yes, we do that. We do that. How authentic the information is that he is given.
Background verification.
So it really helps. Facebook really helps in that aspect, but not as a talent acquisition tool, I would say. Adam, I have another question. I am Sunaina. I represent Bajaj Capital, which is a financial services and investment planning firm. Now, most of the technology platforms that we use right now, these are all in-house developed. And we have a 60-70 member IT strong team. And they're all Microsoft certified, engineers and really very highly skilled professionals. And what we do is that we invest a lot of our time, energy into training them on the nitty-gritties of the business that we are in. For example, most of our engineers are, and some of them are CFPs, Certified Financial Planners, some of them are licentiates, some of them are AMFI certified. So why we invest so much of time, energy, effort in them is that they understand the business and they come up with the relevant solutions. And they've really done a tremendous and an excellent job so far. But when it comes to the technology partners who come and offer their solutions, most of the times what we have seen is either they're not ready to customize the solutions as per the requirements that we have, or they do and then midway they would say, now it's not possible on this platform, and this is what we have, either you take it or you leave it. And then leaving the client in kind of a lurch. So how do you ensure that whatever platforms are offered to clients, you understand it, and every business is different. For example, investment planning is different, FMCG, industries are different. How do you ensure that you meet their needs in such a way that every aspect of their business is kept into mind while designing these tools and doing the customization? This is one of the biggest challenges we have faced, and probably that is the reason that we have been developing all our tools in-house. Now, kind of recently we developed one excellent tool, and I don't know how many of you are aware of that. It's like when it comes to interviewing and doing the basic shortlisting, it's the machine with interviews. We have developed a software, and the questions have been put so intelligently, and we have created a virtual chat room where a candidate feels that the HR head is chatting with him, but it's actually the machine. And basis the script, we shortlist or we reject a candidate. So that is the extent that we have developed, and it's all because we thought it should be this way, and we discussed it with our IT team, and they came up with such fantastic tools. So, I mean, how do you ensure that clients, you understand their businesses, and then you come up with the solutions, relevant solutions, and then you're ready to customize?
This is another one where I think there's been a natural evolution over time. So when these systems first came out, the very first cloud computing systems, or ASP systems that came out, actually failed because what they did was they customized the system for the first client. And then they got the second client and they customized it for the second client. But by the 10th client, the system became so difficult to maintain and manage because they had so many different custom versions of these different systems that essentially they had the same difficulty as on-premise computing, except they were doing it tenfold or 100-fold, making it much, much more difficult. All those businesses failed. Then came the next generation of true cloud computing, which was configurable instead of customized. So the more configurable it was, the easier it was for those companies to acquire multiple customers and continue to add to the ranks of their client roster by having each tool have lots of different configurability options. Now, that didn't necessarily meet every single requirement of every single company in every industry, but it was much more flexible than the initial systems and allowed for continued growth. Then came the next generation. When everybody started doing that, you started to have vertical